The mentor-protege relationship between Dr. Dre and The Game has been marred with complications, proxy wars, and turbulence over a 20-year period. Dre was a member of NWA, which helped popularize the West Coast gangsta rap sound in the late 1980s. The group's tenure on top was cut short due to internal feuding, which resulted in its disbandment in 1991. He then co-founded Death Row Records, which became one of the largest rap labels of its time, thanks in large part to Dre's contribution and his Chronic album, which was released in 1992. However, there was trouble in paradise, and by 1996, Dre left the label for greener pastures. He then established a new label called Aftermath Entertainment that same year, with the intention of continuing his legacy of producing and releasing music. It was a child label under Jimmy Iovine's well-established Interscope Records. The move ended up being lucrative as the label released Eminem's The Slim Shady LP in 1999, which was an overwhelming success, and Dr. Dre's 2001 album that same year, which was an even greater success. 2001 helped reshape the West Coast hip-hop sound and continued to inspire young people to pursue a career in rap. One of the youngsters at the time was Cedar Block Pyru Blood member Jayceon Terrell Taylor, who later adopted the name The Game. The Game idolized Dre and started rapping seriously in 2001. He released a mixtape in 2002 and was nearly signed by Bad Boy Records. Eventually, his music caught Dr. Dre's ear, who then reached out to The Game to build a relationship. Following a series of events, Game signed a deal with Aftermath Entertainment in 2003 and began working on his debut studio album. At around the same time, Eminem, 50 Cent, and G-Unit were red hot thanks to well-received musical releases. Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre discussed and agreed that it would make good business sense to incorporate The Game into G-Unit so that he could get the rub from 50 and his groupmates. The move would also help G-Unit as it would put eyes on a new talent that people were not familiar with. This proved to be a great idea as 50 Cent gave away songs that he was planning on using for his own album To Game. 50 also wrote hooks, ultimately contributing to 6 songs on The Game's upcoming album. Eminem, who was also establishing himself as a formidable producer, jumped in the mix and had Game fly to Detroit, Michigan to work together on some songs. Ultimately, one song titled We Ain't was chosen for inclusion on the album. M produced the track and also contributed vocals to the track. Dr. Dre contributed production on 7 songs on the album, as well as mixing on various tracks. The album was titled The Documentary, and the rest of the production work was completed by various highly sought-out producers. Everything seemed to be lining up in The Game's favor as he made cameos in various G-Unit videos. He also released singles including West Side Story and How We Do in 2004 from his yet-to-be-released debut album. Both songs acknowledged Dre's presence in The Game's life. In How We Do, Game acknowledged that Dre lifted him from a bad environment. He rapped, Compton, Dre found me in the slums, selling that skunk, one hand on my gun. In West Side Story, Game again acknowledged that Dre lifted him up. He rapped, been there, done that, soul crack, got jacked, got shot, came back, jumped on Dre's back. How We Do performed well commercially thanks in large part to 50 Cent's contribution as a writer and performer. It was pretty clear that Game was being positioned to become the flagship West Coast artist that would represent G-Unit. He was also poised to help revive West Coast hip-hop back to prominence, as at that time the airwaves were flooded with the New York sound and the Dirty South sound, which was on the rise. Dre's guidance and mentorship was crucial to The Game's success as it helped to shape the sound of the documentary into being the big-sounded record that it became due to Dre's signature being all over the production and mixing style, which featured hard-hitting kick drums, pristine vocals, crispy snare drums, and clearly defined melodies. The Game also idolized Dre, not only for his production skills, but for his ability to create hip-hop stars as he had done during his Death Row Records days. At the time that the documentary was being put together, 50 Cent was also working on his Massacre album. Dre focused his energy on the documentary and as such, didn't have his hands in on 50's album as much. This upset 50 and started to create a gap between him and Game. In a 2019 interview on the People's Party podcast with Talib Kweli, Game outright blamed Dre, stating,
and I blame Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre spent too much time on the completion of the documentary, and he didn't spend the fourth quarter of 50's Massacre album working with 50. And the Massacre still did numbers, you know what I'm saying? But 50 felt like Dre should have did that and then finished Game, since 50 had lended his time to me, you know what I'm saying? Which I felt like, you know, in a perfect man's world, that Dre should have focused on 50 and then came and saw the documentary second.
Before the documentary came out in early 2005, 50 and Game developed a rivalry because the Game did not want to engage in a beef with Fat Joe and Jadakiss, who became 50's rivals after featuring on Ja Rule's song New York. The documentary came out on January 18, 2005 to great success, eventually selling 5 million copies worldwide. However, by the time of its release, the tension between 50 and Game became public knowledge, and people were already speculating whether the Game was still a part of G-Unit. In February 2005, Game went on the radio and shared his reasons for not wanting to take part in any issues with Jada and Fat Joe. 50 took Game's non-participatory approach as a sign of disloyalty, so he kicked Game out of G-Unit on air during a radio interview. He later appeared on Funkmaster Flex's show on Hot 97, where he reiterated his sentiments. During that interview, 50 Cent claimed that Game had a tough time completing the documentary, and only when 50 got involved did things pick up. Fifth also claimed that the Game was on the brink of being dropped from his deal and was saved by 50's contributions, which included writing and performance credits for up to 6 songs. Some of the songs had originally been 50's tracks, which he handed over to the Game in an act of good faith as a label mate. The feud put Dre in an awkward position as both 50 Cent and the Game were signed to Aftermath Records. Dre attempted to mediate the situation and reel everyone in so as not to incur further damage. The dissension became a major talking point in the hip-hop community. In an attempt to salvage things, Dr. Dre alongside Jimmy Iovine arranged for 50 Cent and the Game to appear together at a charity event on March 9, 2005. The two rappers appeared on stage and even hugged it out, but the damage had already been done, as that was the last time the two interacted publicly on a face-to-face basis. Dre's attempts to mend things between the two rappers went to waste as the Game shook off the G-Unit tag and continued his career without the group's input. Game's split with G-Unit was the beginning of what seemed to be an emotional downward spiral, as he seemingly felt alienated by his mentor and West Coast legend Dr. Dre. Issues escalated between Game and 50 with the release of a variety of diss tracks that went back and forth. The disputes made it difficult to house both artists under the Aftermath banner, and since both were commercially viable artists, the decision was made to draft the Game to Geffen Records, which was a sister label under the Interscope Records umbrella. The move didn't hinder Game's ability to work with some of the same producers that had worked on the documentary, such as Kanye West, High Tech, and Just Blaze, and Scott Storch, who broke away from Dre's camp to pursue a solo production career. The album, which came out in 2006, was titled Doctor's Advocate and was clearly a homage to Dr. Dre, whom Game saw as a mentor and father figure in the music industry. Prior to its release, Game was interviewed by XXL magazine. When discussing Dre's involvement in the album, Game said, "And on this album, I already been in the studio with Dre on this album. I got beats from Dre early. I worked with Dre early on this album." He later clarified that the beats were from early sessions he had when he was beginning work on the album. In that same interview, it was revealed that Dre had attempted to be a peacemaker of sorts when he told Game not to respond to 50 Cent, but Game did not listen, and that contributed to Game being moved from Aftermath to Geffen Records. Game confessed his regrets for going against Dre, stating, "I kind of felt like I betrayed Dr. Dre, but you know, it ain't no love lost. I had to do what I had to do to keep my career afloat." Game mentioned that Dre reached out to me on numerous occasions, and I'm pretty sure he did the same thing to 50. I got a few phone calls from Dre about stopping the beef and talking to 50, but I'm hard-headed. I do me. I do what I want to do, man. Before Doctor's Advocate came out, the songs that Dre had produced got leaked online and never made it on the album. The Game later told Talib Kweli on the People's Podcast in 2019.
I put those songs on the internet myself, the ones that Dre did, because I didn't want him to have any involvement in the album. I was pissed off at him for what I felt like was choosing 50's side.
Game also dove deeper into his relationship with Dre, stating that at the time he was working on the documentary, Dre wasn't fully present in the same way he seemed to be at the time that Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style album or Eminem's albums was being made. This was because Game dismissed some of Dre's input, such as not releasing a mixtape before an album or beefing with 50. Game did both regardless of the advice, so Dre took a step back and let Game follow his own path.
And a lot of people don't know that Dre wasn't there. Like when I saw the Chronic album or Doggy Style or Eminem shit, Dre was there. But for me, he wasn't there, and I didn't really understand why not until, like recently.
As Game was not known publicly prior to the documentary, the public was curious and anxious to hear whether he could put together quality music without Dre or 50's input. Doctor's Advocate was released in November 2006 to critical and commercial success. It contained more of the traditional West Coast sound than the documentary, with some of its music containing the snappy drums and piano clink sound that Dre helped pioneer with Scott Storch a few years prior. Without looking at the production credits, one could have been easily fooled that Dre contributed production to the album. It was clear that The Game was so enamored with his mentor that he name-dropped Dre on all but one song on the project. On the title track, Doctor's Advocate, Game rapped in a drunken manner while directly addressing Dre. Dre, I ain't mean to turn my back on you, but I'm a man, and sometimes a man do what he gotta do. In the second verse, Game continued, I never said thank you, and I took you for granted. You let me in your house and made me a part of your family. Game went on to pledge his loyalty to Dre, rapping, You still my homeboy, Doc. I'd take a bullet for you. I'm not asking you to take my side in the beat. As the song progressed, Game got more personal, rapping, I told you, you was like a father to me. I meant that. Sitting here looking at my platinum plaques, thinking what the fuck am I without a Dr. Dre track? That song, more than any other, put into perspective Game's true feelings and admiration for his mentor, as well as his desire to maintain that relationship despite no longer working on music together. The Game also referenced his regret for not taking Dre's advice in the song One Night, which contains the line, couldn't be a real homeboy to save your life. I should have took Dr. Dre's advice. While the line was referencing Game's relationship with people in his circle and the way their behavior changed as he became famous, the sentiment of listening to Dr. Dre's advice was an issue that was clearly going through the Game's mind. In a 2023 Vlad TV interview, when asked why Dre was not the executive producer of the album despite its obvious homage to him, Game responded,
Because he financially and infrastructurally, he had to take sides with who Jimmy took sides with,
which is 50.
Okay. And so it made sense because that's where the bulk of the money was being made. And so at that point, you didn't want to piss 50 off because he was the breadwinner. So yeah, everybody chose sides, but I did the Doctor's Advocate, and no one thought it was coming out. They thought I was done.
Game also mentioned that not having Dre and 50 in his corner allowed him to show that his success was not dependent on them and that he was capable of putting together a commercially successful and critically acclaimed body of work without their input. In 2007, The Game began to work on his third studio album, titled LAX. New Jersey Devil, who was his DJ at the time, announced that Dr. Dre had submitted beats to The Game to be used for the album, but those beats were ultimately not used as the album, which came out in 2008, had no input by Dre. The album also featured a noticeable departure from the West Coast sound, which was prominent in the documentary and particularly in Doctor's Advocate. In 2009, an image of Dre, Snoop, and The Game in the studio was posted online. Snoop appeared on Big Boy's radio show and explained that the picture was taken while the three were working on Dre's mythical album, Detox. The fact that Dre and The Game were still working on music affirmed that despite Game no longer being under Aftermath Entertainment, the two musicians had a working relationship. In a later interview, according to Game, Dr. Dre told him,
Game, me and you are always going to be the way that we left off. Whatever happens in between, all of that. If we left on good terms, that's how we going to be. If the last time I seen you, we was like each other, the next time I see you, it's going to be like each other until we fix it. So that's our thing, man. And I got
that's family, though. That's
I got nothing but love for Dre, man. Everything that he did for me, I'm very appreciative.
In 2010, Game took to social media and posted a picture of himself wearing an Aftermath Entertainment chain with the caption, "It's funny how things come full circle, R.E.D." The post raised speculation that he had gone back to Aftermath and would release his fourth album, The Red Album, under that label. However, in a later interview, Game clarified that the picture meant he stated in a 2023 Vlad TV interview,
Basically, that was my ode to Dre, just saying that, like, I'm always going to be Aftermath no matter what. And it's still to this day. Aftermath is Dr. Dre.
As the years passed, The Game often spoke of Dr. Dre in mostly a positive manner and mentioned him in his albums. He used words such as family and protege to describe his relationship with Dre. Then, in February 2022, Dr. Dre performed at the Superbowl 56 halftime show, which took place in Inglewood, California. The show had appearances from various notable artists and Dre's close collaborators, including Snoop Dogg, Eminem, 50 Cent, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, and Anderson .Paak. The Game was one of the notable former Dre collaborators that was excluded from the performance, and he did not take to it kindly. In March 2022, Game appeared on the Drink Champs podcast, during which he expressed negative feelings towards Dre. He stated that Kanye West was his Dre, going as far as saying,
It's crazy that Ye did more for me in the last 2 weeks than Dre did for me my whole career. And it's not, it's what it is.
In a 2024 Vlad TV interview, Game explained the situation by alluding that some of the statements he made were because he was drinking on Drink Champs, which may have impaired his judgment. He further explained that at the time of the statement, he felt like Kanye was more supportive than Dre, and that Dre would understand why the statement was made as the two talked every so often. Game explained that his exclusion from the Super Bowl was likely because he was viewed as a dangerous artist, and as such having him perform at a massive event like the Super Bowl was probably not wise. These were his own thoughts, as neither Dre, Jay-Z, or anyone of repute who was involved in organizing the halftime show said anything about why Game was not included. Game's comments on Drink Champs did not go over well with the public, as they gave the image of a bitter and entitled individual. Moreover, his last musical collaboration with Dre was nearly 20 years prior to the Super Bowl, and he had not had a close relationship with Dre over the years by his own admission in various interviews. In April 2022, Snoop was a guest on Drink Champs, and one of the things he was asked about was the Super Bowl performance and Game's remark. Snoop shared that he respected Game's opinions, and at the end of the day, they were all family and were under the Dr. Dre tree. Snoop also commented that not everyone could be included, as Dre was given 12 minutes to perform at the Super Bowl. He illustrated this point by stating that certain artists who were crucial to Dre's journey, such as Ice Cube, also did not perform. Snoop went further to say that Nothing But a G Thing and popular songs from Snoop's extensive Death Row catalog with Dre, as well as songs from NWA and the Ruthless Records catalog, were not performed due to limitations. All of this was sending the subliminal message that the Game should not have taken things too personally, as the Super Bowl performance was challenging to put together for everyone involved, and it was all put together to complement Dr. Dre. In June 2022, Game was interviewed by 107.5 GCI, during which he said that he had not spoken with Dre since the Super Bowl statement. He added that he was not worried, as he expected that they would eventually talk and set things straight due to their history. In the same interview, he further clarified that Dre did not do him a favor by signing him to Aftermath Entertainment, as the deal was mutually beneficial, whereas Kanye connected Game to other entities, which enabled Game to potentially make more money than he did prior. In the same month of June 2022, the Game appeared on the I Am Athlete podcast, where he admitted that he was hurt about being left out of the Super Bowl performance, as he felt it was an LA event and he should have been included. But he also stated that he was no longer hurt by it. But 2 months later, in August 2022, he released his 10th studio album, Drillmatic, which contained a diss song towards Eminem titled Black Slim Shady. The song referenced personal things about Eminem, and Dre's name was repeatedly used throughout the track in a non-negative way. Game later admitted that he dissed Eminem out of anger for Dre leaving him off the Super Bowl halftime show. Since Dre wasn't a rapper and Game viewed 50 as lyrically inferior, Eminem was the next best target due to his close association with Dre. He made that statement in a 2024 Vlad TV interview, saying,
Throwing shots at Eminem and beef with Eminem. It was just me being upset with Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre can't out-rap me, so I just went at M, just because that's just how I get sometimes. But it's always competitive. It ain't like I'm gonna see M and be like, what's up now? You know what I'm saying? It's M.
In 2024, Dr. Dre appeared on Drink Champs alongside Snoop Dogg to promote their new album, Missionary, which was a spiritual successor to Snoop's 1993 debut album, Doggy Style. When Nori asked Dr. Dre how he felt about the Super Bowl performance and whether anyone had been left out, Dre simply responded, "No, I was good. It was perfect." All in all, Game and Dr. Dre's relationship seemed to be like that of a son who idolized and wanted the approval of his father, but didn't get it. From Game's arrival on the music scene to the 2020s, Dre maintained his usual approach of not publicly speaking out or adding fuel to negative news and claims about him. It ultimately made Dre appear mature, in contrast to Game's frequent outbursts on social media and in interviews.